Hey everyone, it's Ashley. I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about easy seated, or what is referred to in Sanskrit as Sukhasana. Uh, it is the seated pose. Some folks refer to it as easy seated. I'm not sure that that's um, the case across the board. I know for quite some time, seated, kind of this crisscross applesauce thing, I just wasn't getting it. And I noticed that teaching it, or not teaching it, sorry, this is teaching it, asking clients to get into it, to find easy seated or to sit down to start their practice. I noticed that it really wasn't easy for a lot of people. And I also noticed that people's just position overall looked very uncomfortable, and I would say pretty unsafe. It really did look like standing back over whatever space I was teaching in or guiding in and looking out at people sitting on invisible couches or um, laying back in their bed, with a bunch of pillows and their head flung back or their head flung forward. I could kind of almost pinpoint who drives a lot in a day or drives for their job just by sort of how they were holding or not holding things. So I sort of got to a point where I was like, okay, let's make sure when we teach a beginner series, we're teaching how to sit, okay? So this is what this little tutorial or video is all about. It's not as simple as just sit down. I wish it was, but there's a little bit that goes into it. So I wanted to break it down for everyone. I wanted to show you some options. I wanted to show you ways to kind of modify or different props that you can utilize. And I wanted to kind of show you via the shape of my body how we are looking to maybe stack things, support things, not so that you can master some shape, but that's so you can find Sukhasana in a way that it fits your body, like I said earlier, safely and comfortably. Okay, so I'm in my Sukhasana position. Okay, I'll show you the side here in a moment. But as you can see, hips right now, these are my hip bones, and they are higher than my knees. Okay. Again, in a moment you'll see side profile, but my pelvis is kind of spilling forward a little. Okay. A couple notes on the pelvis. It's kind of like a bowl if we were to look at sort of a diagram or whatever of a pelvis. And we don't want our pelvis perfectly neutral in this position. We want sort of a tipping forward, okay? But not so much that if this bowl had something in it, it would spill out, okay? We also don't want having it tip backwards so that it would spill out behind me. We want it sort of just about to tip out, right? Or tip forward. So it's slightly neutral, and there's a slight anterior tilt. So a shifting forward, like I'm kind of lifting my booty bones. Not much, because once I've determined I have sufficient support for my sits bones, then I don't have to worry so much about what I'm holding or not holding. My shoulders are down as far away from my earlobes as I can manage in this moment. My neck is long. If I was really, truly kind of coming into this to meditate or to check in or to build on into other postures, I would make sure that my chin is either lifted just a little, or depending on what we're doing, it might even be slightly tucked. But for the most part, I take head, gaze neutral, and the nose is sort of just centered, pointing forward, okay? Hands for me, They come usually closer to my knees. And for the most part, I like, if I'm meditating, if I'm doing breath work, if I'm just finding some stillness, I like hands down. Okay, some folks like the palms face up. There's a little story on the street as far as yoga goes, or yoga circles go, that if the palms are face open, this indicates you've got maybe a little more energy stored up, and you could kind of giving some of it away. You could afford that. Now, if the palms are face down, okay, this is supposedly indicates that you need to conserve. You're not working with much. What you do have, you need to hold on to, okay? So you're welcome to play around with that concept. Some folks have hands stacked at the lap, right? Some folks are finding a specific mudra. This is a mudra, right? These little prayer hands, okay? Some people find mudra over here with their fingers. For the most part, though, I always tell folks, find a good resting place for the hands where they can just chill out and be hands, you know, where you don't feel like I've got to fight and grip just to be here, okay? Now, from the side, I want to show you sort of the back body here. So I really like to use this support. Make sure I back up a little. So this support allows me to lean forward slightly. And as you can see, right, my spine is lengthening up, up, up. This is that idea of the straight back, flat back. No, there's really no such thing. Unless, of course, something, you know, something might be wrong. There's no such thing. We want a nice long spine, lengthening up. Right? And then for me, I've got this just itty bit of what's called kyphosis, where my head sort of tips forward. It looks like it is, but it's not. So when I do this, I try to be mindful of sort of leaning the head back a little too. As you can see, shoulders far away from the ears. And settled. And my belly's soft here. And I'm kind of sliding forward on my support. Now my ankles here feel okay. If your ankles feel a little crunchy here, or maybe they feel uncomfortable and you could use a little support, that's one of those places where we pull in the blanket. So I would place the blanket right below my feet, okay? My ankles. Now for me, my crisscross, as you can see, is more of sometimes it's a stacking, right? An ankle on an ankle, so that it's almost lotus pose, but no, not for this tutorial. Some people really do kind of do the old school crisscross applesauce, where it's almost like my ankles are crossed, okay? And the knees still kind of point up a little, right? They definitely don't just easily lower to gravity. If this is the case in the beginning and the pelvis is set up correctly and you're on those booty bones, remember, rock against those bones, then this is fine, okay? Now, speaking of booty bones, or what we call the ischial tuberosities. So if you take your hand, this is going to sound a little silly, but play along, right? We're learning right now. You take your hands and you kind of go under your booty and you kind of feel around for those hard bony-like points under each butt cheek. Okay, those are your sits bones, right? I can feel, oh, that bone, there it is. Another great way to think about it is to think when you're sitting on a bicycle, like an old school banana seat, and you've got that shape, right, where you're supposed to sit the butt and support it. That's how we want to sit on the floor, the ground, the surface when we find Sukhasana. So a lot of us, because of life, right, our lifestyle, it's a lot of this. And right here I'm sitting, right, I'm dumping into the flesh of my butt, but I'm also sitting on my low back. I'm sitting all over the sacral area. I mean, my tailbone is, I don't even know if I'm sitting there. It might actually be kind of tilted between my legs right now. But this is the reality for a lot of folks, okay? So if this is what happens when you sit down, nothing underneath you, right? Be mindful. Be like, so you're telling me I gotta sit up big time? Yeah, you gotta pretend like the back of that chair is not there, because it ain't right now. You gotta sit up, shoulders back. Now, this might feel right out the gate like, ow, Like I'll teach kiddos, and even the kids will be like, oh, my low back. Okay, it's stretching. It's okay, right? Uncomfortable things they're okay. And this might just be an indication you don't sit on your butt a lot, okay? And now bolster, here we go. Bolster is another tool that we can use. Some of us need just a little more lift, okay? A little cushion is cool, it's fancy, but I need to be up a little higher because maybe I am still crossing my ankles, okay? Maybe sitting on the ground is uncomfortable for me, and maybe I low-key know that getting up from the ground it can be a challenge. So this can be great. Even putting a blanket underneath or on top of the bolster, right, for even more elevation, or taking that blanket and placing it back underneath here. Oh, so you can start kind of training the body. I'm in the low back. I'm sitting on my sacrum here. Oh, now there's kind of my butt. Oh, there's the butt bones. Oh, she said to kind of lean forward. Oh, but shoulders back. Okay, okay. That's bolster. Blocks can also be helpful. Now, if you don't have fancy blocks, no worries. You can use some sturdy, bigger books. Those can be helpful. But I place this block the flat way. See, there we go. Okay, place it this way, and I place it the wider stance so that it can hold my butt, right? I don't want my butt bones spilling off the sides here. I want this to support me as much like a little chair seat as it can. And then I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to make sure, oh, okay, this ain't so bad, right? And if I needed a blanket under my ankles, I would. And I would cross my legs, and believe it or not, before I got fancy and found a cushion that I loved, a block was where it was at. It still kind of feels like it's where it's at. And even though this is a cork block, and I like to use cork blocks in my classes now, this is actually great support, and you can just place a blanket over it, right, in the beginning, or maybe just most of the time when you come to seated. If you go to a yoga class and you know you're going to be doing some seated work, right? I just covered that right over. Oh, this is awesome. And then I wiggle. I go, oh, there's those butt bones. I rock against them and I plug down through and I sit up tall. I relax my shoulders. I mean, this might be kind of how you always come to seated, especially if you're finding like time to look for a little bit of stillness, to practice meditation, practice seated breath work, or even just practice this posture. This is great. And guess what? These could be blocks under this blanket too. And this blanket doesn't need to be a yoga blanket. It can be a blanket that's comfortable but kind of sturdy. Okay, so don't grab like the thinnest, softest, fleeciest blanket you have on hand. Grab something that might even be kind of an old blanket, so that it holds you. Okay. Move this out of the way just so you can kind of see. Right? Look at this little. Look at that little tiny Sukhasana throne I just made here. Okay. Now, in the beginning, like I said, when I first started this was my crisscross applesauce. This was it, and even dropping my shoulders back was like, like it bothered my hips and my legs and my ankles. Take breaks when you need them. Okay, this is like half butterfly, half crisscross applesauce. I sit up tall, right? And I kind of rock side to side. I do it with the other side, rock side to side. Right? Give your body a chance to get to know the pose, to get used to feeling it out, what it's like to breathe in the posture, right? Step by step. Okay, that's sort of the essence or the point of all of these little tutorials. These little steps are maybe on the surface simple, but they require quite a bit. If nothing else, they require, your attention, awareness, your patience, and here it comes, right? Grace and compassion. Big deal. All right. If I didn't have any of those ingredients, or I only had a couple of them, chances are the posture for me is just not going to work, right? So go easy on yourself, all right? And that is your little tutorial on Sukhasana, or easy seated, right? And I look forward to you deepening your practice and learning more. Namaste.